we have a few disputes about what is art and what is not art and maybe science, but that is for me the big challenge being invited to this project, to actually to be able to talk to people who are out of my field, and also to talk to a very old friend. Anders and I know each other for a very long time. We went to school together, so we have communicated about almost everything apart from our professions, where we seem to be unable to communicate. So that's how we started with this thing. And I also want to thank you, Candace, for inviting me here. And I was really happy because the original 9 evenings is something that has been quite important to me as an artist ever since I studied. And I actually met Billy Cleaver in the 90s, because our school in Stockholm was just, or is still, just next to the Moderna Museet, which Billy Cleaver was also involved in a lot in the 60s. And Robert Rauschenberg did quite a few of his famous performances in the 60s at that museum. So there's a connection. And he came and presented 9 evenings to us at the school, and I was blown away, and I thought that was absolutely cool. And I think that's when I also tripped into this field of working also with electronics. So I'm just going to show you. I'm just going to quickly just go through some of my artworks, because I think it's more important that we get into a sort of discussion here to see if we can develop something together, or if we can pair up here for the main event in October. So this is an old picture from my studio where I'm tinkering on an artwork. This is maybe 2007 or 2008. And then I was well into working with sensors and light. Predominantly I worked with light then. But I started out shortly after I graduated. I graduated in 98, and then this project was my first public art project, because I work predominantly with the public space as my platform where I actually produce my artwork, but it's also where I get, or I kind of, that's where I think about my art. And this is the City Library in Malmö in South Sweden, which was fairly new. And they decided to build a really huge library to show we are now a great city. Now we need a big library. And they did that just at the time when books started to kind of disappear, and when the digitalization of books and the written word started to happen. But they didn't plan for that, so they just built a library. And the library, the main building of the library, is a huge glass box. It's 5 stories high. But the architect probably knew 1 or 2 things, because there are no books in this library, because it was too big for having books in it. And I thought that was hilarious. So I decided to kind of do something with this building. And what I wanted to do was to turn it on and turn it off. Now the building exists, now it doesn't exist. And also to correlate that with the binary system. So the simplest way for that was to turn off and on the main switch. And so I proposed it, and they thought it was great. It took 2 years before they allowed me to go in there. And then I had created funding for the project and everything. So that's where my start is. So where we can actually see here is on the left, that's the museum is on, the museum is off. And it was kind of flicking like that. And ever since that, I've been working with public space, and in the beginning a lot with light. And this is a project called Pulsing Path, and it's in Madrid. And there's a big street there, Paseo del Prado, which has a sort of a park in the middle, and there are 2 heavily trafficked streets on either side. And there are 2 sort of paths through this park where a lot of people walk. And I actually just hook the lanterns up to a light controller, so I slowly dim down the light. These are still footages, but it was dimmed down, and then it was dark, and then it came back again. So it was kind of a pulsing light situation. And the image that you saw at the beginning, I was tinkering on this project, which is called Privileged Situation, and it consists of IR sensors that will detect if an object or something is underneath it. And then next to this sensor there is a simple LED that, so when something is underneath this object, it will be lit. And I put that in a completely dark room. So you enter this room, and everywhere where some of your body parts, they will trigger this light. So you would actually be in light, but you will not have, you will still not see the room. So your spatial awareness will still be hampered by darkness, but you will be lit up. And if other people came into the room, they will appear maybe like planets in space or something. Zone, out of vision, and is another project which has been made in several versions, and this version is also made in Malmö in South Sweden, and it's built on a bridge to the museum. The art museum in Malmö is in an old castle, and it has a moat, and the only access is over a bridge. And this bridge is normally not lit, so I put up these fancy lights there, and these lights made perfect squares of light that you could cross through, and it looked really fancy. But here it is, when you actually enter these lights, the light disappears, which is like contradicts what normally is when you use sensors and motion sensors. You normally would use that to have light when you park your car and you walk to your porch or whatever. And here is just after we installed it, this is probably some of the staff biking home. Oh, that was, well, you can see, here she is biking, and then she goes into the next one. She's always in darkness, and she's looking for light instead of the other way around. And here I've been invited a lot to art institutions because I did this library thing, and they say, hey Gustav, can't you come and flash our library? And I said, well, or our museum. And I said, well, that would be nice, but that was a very site-specific artwork, so I can't do it. And I don't know when this building was built, 2000 or something. It's in Helsingborg in Sweden. They made a huge culture house with a beautiful art gallery, and they started to run a really fantastic art program, international art program. And the building was given by a family, by a big corporation, to the city. Like, here you have this building. You have to run it, but we give you the building. After a few years, the politicians were saying, like, no, what is going on here? This is not good what you're showing, because people don't understand. That's how, when politicians always say people cannot understand when they don't have a clue themselves. So what they were saying, like, oh, you're not getting enough people to this place. And so, okay, the library had, or this art gallery had a detector to count people coming in out of the place. So I just hooked into that, and these red and yellow and green light, that is normally white, so I put color filters on the lights, these floodlights, and attached it, so it actually became like this meter on a stereo that goes up with the volume. So every time someone walked into the entrance, I don't have a video now to show it, it made a pulse that could be seen all across the city, because this is a centrally placed building as well. And at the end of the day, you would see a representation on the wall, how many people who've actually gone in and out and through the door. So I thought that would be the end of the discussion, but no, it wasn't. The politicians finally kicked out the curators, and now that place is a memory, because it's become a terrible place for contemporary art and contemporary culture whatsoever. And I've always been interested. I've been interested in like some sort of social issues. That's what I want to work in public space, and interaction, and not just a technical interaction, but interaction with the artwork, which is probably you could stem from minimalist sculpture in the 60s. And And early in my career, I was maybe more then than now also concerned about property and what belongs to anyone and who controls things. And when I also had decided I don't want to do any large projects anymore, and especially not outdoor projects, I came up with this idea, which was shown here a year ago. And it's made for a public space, and it was also shown in a public space several times. It's called Obstruction, and it is these road barriers that open and close randomly. And here is in Stockholm outside the City Museum. So I will just show you a video. Do we have sound? Yes, we have sound. That's enough, it's good. And so these road barriers, they open and close randomly. So it's a very simple construction. And I usually don't really talk about it because I think it's the symbolic values of these barriers and the markings on them is something that talks differently depending on what experience you have. I was more concerned of kind of creating a machine that was more a little bit like what life is about. And we try to control our lives, but we can't really control our lives because there's always something randomly coming in our way. Illness, crisis, wars, something. And sometimes we float easily through lives, but sometimes something comes. So that was my main idea. And people use it in different ways. And of course, kids love it as a toy. But also grown-ups. When I place it in an outdoor space, people actually come and sort of play with it. And they obey. I've only showed it in Germany and in Sweden. And only kids would crawl underneath a barrier when they get bored. But grown-ups, they would stand and wait until it opens. And then they'll go out. But that says maybe something about Germans and Swedes, but I don't know. So, and a couple of years ago I was invited to do a commission for the biomedical center at the Uppsala University. And this is like a state and a private gene laboratory. And I went there, oh cool, that's interesting. I'm going to see people in white coats, and I have to go to laboratories. Oh nice, and I'm probably going to get inspired by all that and make a great artwork. And I came there and I was very disappointed. They had a few little labs where they actually did some little things, and they had microscopes and they had white coats. But most of the work is sequencing with computers, and they're hooked up to like a NASA-sized computer. I was a bit disappointed because there was no visuals. The visuals were staple diagrams and figures and numbers, and it was all abstract to me. But then I thought, well, that is what is interesting, how they present their ideas and how they communicate their ideas. So I played around with that, and then I thought, well, why don't I just use their language, how they present things, and these diagrams. And I make the diagrams being like simulated the diagrams to be organic. So I hooked up, I made like a three-dimensional diagram. So each of these frames are, you could see that as an axis, a 3D axis. And that's where the colors come from as well, the blue, the red, and the green. The X, Y, and the Z axis. And the work is called X, Y, Z. And I put sensors in there, so the red color is a temperature sensor, and the blue is humidity, and the green is carbon dioxide. And these are also values that kind of is needed for life, at least for human life. And at one part in this room, they have this fancy green walls that all architects in Sweden are now placing indoors. And I thought, well, that's cool because they produce oxygen and we produce carbon dioxide to them. And then that would be the staple diagram. But then when I realized that, oh, that would be really boring if you just have like a meter hanging there. It's not art. And the white light is the energy consumption of each frame. So I was talking to the guy who's helping me programming these things, and I said, look, we have to find a way to calibrate this, but also I'm not interested in the exact numbers. How can we deal with this? Because it needs to be funky, it needs to be cool to watch, but also it needs to be an artwork. So we're not really interested in facts. And he couldn't understand me. He was saying, oh, but you know, Gustav, I can be really, really exact. And I said, but I don't want to be exact. I want to be somewhere between the 0 and the 1, somewhere in between there. And after a while, something clicked in his head, and he created an algorithm. It's not a big complex algorithm, but it means that it's constantly adjusting its scale or its resolution. So you get like a waveform of light that is changing all the time. And here we go for a video, I think. I hope. So it is as this diagram has a life of its own. The art people of the commission, they said like, oh, we don't understand this, so we don't know if this is a good artwork. But the people researching here, they said, don't worry, we're gonna crack this. So they bought it and we built it there. And it moves really slowly. And it's also, my idea was also this, that you look at it once, the next time you look there, it looks differently. And also, because of its size, and depending on where you are in the room, you can only see parts of it, which is also sort of, I think, a dilemma of science or art or anything. We are only able to look at a tiny little bit of the world at one time. So I'll stop there. And I'm going to move into what Mr. Leipzig and Mr. Hellberg are going to do together. And oh, thanks. So we've already started to collaborate with this project in mind, this 9 evenings in mind. And when we started to talk, I mean, that's why I wanted to work with Anders, is because when we meet privately, we talk a lot about difficulties in our own fields, like why is it so difficult to get people to understand things within our own fields, and political things and all that inside art and in science. So that's how I approached Anders, and then we started to talk, and we talked about, oh yeah, communication is a problem. And yeah, we discussed that, and then nothing more happened, and we didn't know if we were going to work or whatever. And but I went around and I was thinking, okay, I like this idea of the 9 evenings, and I like a lot of the things that were made back then. I probably like Robert Rauschenberg's open score very much, because that lies very close to what I'm doing myself. But also the performative bits, like Deborah Hayes, which you see her performance here. And I was just thinking, I want to build something together with Anders. And because we're talking about communication and lack of communication, and trying to create an interface or something, in my head popped up the World War II German Enigma machine as a sort of a device that could be interesting to use. And the British counterpart, the Colossus, which is also built on like mechanical things. And I thought that Anders and I should build something like that, and it became a huge idea it went away, and I think, yeah, art and science in a nice little marriage. But that idea went away, and when an idea is kind of out of your head, it can mean two things. Either you're too lazy to carry it through, or it is a bad idea. And in this case, I think it was a bad idea. And then Anders came up with this idea of synchronization, which was a sort of a eureka moment, and I think we both thought, well, here is something that we can really build on, and we could discuss problems that we have about this, and it's because we see different end results, and we come from different traditions. I think Anders, as a scientist, he looks more of it like, you know, you have to plan for the end, and because at the end we need to present this thing, and it has to have a shape all the way through. And I say, don't worry, we can fail, and the failure can become the artwork. And no, failure is not an option. So, but to me it is an option, and this is a conflict, and I think that's a creative conflict. And I I mean, we're having fun, we're laughing, and then my approach to this is I'm really impressed by everything I've seen so far here. And I'm really impressed about Anders' presentation here. I don't understand what he's talking about, but it's impressive. I think it looks interesting. But I can sense that there is something there that is worthwhile. And that good feeling I get from that is something that I'm trying to develop in this process. And I think it is play that is what I'm bringing to this, or not bringing, but that's what I'm looking at. And as you see, Anders, and here you see the artist is fooling around on the floor, and the scientist is sitting focused and concentrated at a computer. Maybe it was because I was very hungover that day, I don't know. But it's we had an inspiring talk with lots of beers the night before. And this is, you know, a sort of a spirit that I would like to, you know, introduce, to say this is why I like to be in this project, and I hope that we all can get into this and use the play as an important factor in this project. Thanks.